The Silent Watchers. It began as an ordinary day on Earth. The sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden light across the planet's diverse landscapes, from the icy reaches of the Arctic to the dense jungles of the Amazon. Life continued as it always had. People went about their daily routines, workers commuting to their jobs, students attending schools, families enjoying their meals together. It was a world of bustling activity, a world where the hum of life drowned out the deeper mysteries of the universe. Yet, somewhere far beyond the stars, a far more unsettling reality was unfolding. For years, the Deathworlders had been watching Earth. Silent observers, they had never once intervened or shown themselves. They were a race unlike any humanity had encountered before, a species forged in the most hostile and dangerous of environments. Their planet, a world of savage storms, monstrous beasts, and deadly terrain, had shaped them into something beyond human understanding. And yet, they had watched Earth with an eerie patience. The Deathworlders had never been quick to act. For decades, they had observed humanity from afar, studying their ways and learning from their mistakes. They knew humanity's strengths and weaknesses better than any Earthling could ever guess. They knew how to exploit fear, how to manipulate the flow of information, and how to bend reality itself to their will. But they had remained silent, biding their time, waiting for the moment when humanity's arrogance would finally catch up with them. Now, that moment had come. In a high-security conference room within Earth's united government, the leaders of the planet sat in tense silence. Around them, the vast expanse of human space stretched into infinity, dotted with stars and planets. But there was something else, a faint but unmistakable pattern in the movements of ships on the far edges of human space, something that hadn't been there before. General West, a seasoned veteran of countless battles, broke the silence. His grizzled face was lined with the scars of war, but his eyes held a deeper understanding of the stakes at hand. "They're moving," he said, his voice low but unmistakably filled with concern. "The Deathworlders. Their ships are getting closer." President Thompson, the leader of Earth, sat at the head of the table, her fingers nervously drumming on the polished surface of the table. Her mind raced as she processed the implications of General West's words. For years, Earth had lived under the illusion of peace, lulled by the belief that humanity had mastered the art of diplomacy and coexistence. But now, the Deathworlders were showing signs of aggression. It was unlike anything the human race had ever faced. "What are they waiting for?" President Thompson muttered under her breath. "Why now, after all these years?" General West spoke again, his voice steady but laden with a growing sense of dread. "Perhaps they were waiting for us to make the first move. Maybe they've been watching us all this time, waiting for us to think we were in control. And now, they're ready to show us what true power looks like." The room fell into an uneasy silence. The leaders of Earth had no clear answers, no understanding of what the Deathworlders wanted, or why they had chosen this moment to reveal themselves. All they had were questions, questions that seemed to lead only to more questions. In the heart of Earth's military command center, a steady stream of encrypted messages began to flood in. The data was clear, but the meaning was elusive. Deathworlder ships, large, intimidating, and organized, were moving ever closer to human space. Their pattern was unmistakable. It wasn't just reconnaissance. It wasn't just a show of force. It was something far more calculated, something far more dangerous. As the leaders of Earth scrambled to make sense of the situation, they knew one thing for certain. The calm before the storm was about to end. And when it did, humanity would be forced to confront the consequences of its ignorance. Back in Earth's space stations, far beyond the protective shields of human colonies, the first signs of impending conflict began to manifest. Smaller, unfamiliar Deathworlder ships appeared at the edge of Earth's outer orbit, moving with a precision and purpose that no one could quite understand. The humans aboard the space stations watched in awe and fear as these ships, unlike anything they had ever seen, drifted closer without a word of communication. Their presence was unsettling, like a shadow hanging over Earth's once innocent sky. And yet, despite the growing sense of dread, there was no immediate action. No attack. No signs of an impending war. At least, not yet. The Deathworlders were content to observe, to wait, to see if humanity would respond. They were watching, as they always had. But this time, it felt different. The silence was no longer benign. It was a prelude to something far darker. For Earth, the warning signs were clear. Something was coming. The Deathworlders had been waiting. And now, it seemed, it was time for them to teach humanity a lesson, one that would shake the very foundations of the human race. The questions remained, and the answers seemed out of reach. But one truth had already been established. The storm was coming, and there would be no escaping its wrath. The gathering storm. The sun had barely dipped below the horizon when Earth's leaders gathered in their secure command center, the hum of technological machinery filling the air. The room, once a place of quiet diplomacy and routine strategy, now buzzed with an energy that was both palpable and unnerving. The sleek metallic walls reflected the somber faces of the officials who stood at the heart of the growing crisis. General West stood near a large display screen, his eyes scanning the data that flooded in from all corners of human space. President Thompson, her usually composed demeanor shaken, paced back and forth at the head of the table. The weight of the decisions ahead pressed heavily on her shoulders. For years, humanity had walked the fine line between progress and hubris, believing they were masters of their fate. But now, facing the unknown and the unseen forces of the Deathworlders, that arrogance seemed suddenly fragile. "We need to know more," Thompson said, her voice tight with urgency. "What are they doing? Why now?" Her question hung in the air, unanswered. The room was heavy with the unsaid, the knowledge that they were facing something that could easily overwhelm their defenses, something they had never prepared for. General West, his expression unreadable, turned toward the president. "We've never seen anything like this before," he said, his voice grim. "They're not just hovering on the outskirts of our colonies anymore. They're organizing, moving with purpose." Across the room, Captain Amanda Hayes, a rising star within Earth's military, glanced at the latest intel reports on her screen. Her fingers flew across the touch panel, processing the data as quickly as her mind could handle. "The movements are too deliberate to be random," she added. "It's almost as if they're waiting for us to make a move." The fear in the room was growing by the minute. As the realization began to settle, Earth had underestimated the Deathworlders, and now it was too late for diplomacy or avoidance. The Deathworlders weren't here to negotiate. They weren't here to establish any form of peace. They were here for something else, something far darker, something only they truly understood. President Thompson stopped pacing and fixed her gaze on the screen, which now showed a map of human space dotted with red marks representing Deathworlder ships. "How many ships are we dealing with?" she asked, her voice unwavering, but her mind racing. "At least 100, and they're getting closer," General West replied, his voice steady but full of concern. "And these aren't the usual reconnaissance vessels we've encountered in the past. These ships are larger, more imposing. They've been spotted in several key locations near our colonies. It's almost as if they're surrounding us." The silence in the room deepened. Every individual at the table understood the implications of West's words. The Deathworlders were preparing for something. But what? "We've lived in peace with them for so long," President Thompson muttered to herself. "Why would they choose now to strike? What's changed?" The room remained silent as each person struggled to find an answer, but no one had the clarity they sought. The Deathworlders had always been a mystery to humanity, far too dangerous to provoke, but too enigmatic to understand. Now, the veil of silence that had surrounded them for so long was beginning to lift, revealing only more questions and more fears. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a soft ping from one of the communication terminals. Dr. Elena Clark, a leading scientist specializing in interspecies communication, looked up from her data and cleared her throat. "There's something else," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The Deathworlders aren't just moving ships. We've detected a pattern in their communications. It's encrypted, of course, but we've managed to decipher a small portion." The room leaned in, all eyes on Dr. Clark, as she brought up the decrypted message on the screen. The words, although cryptic, sent a chill through the room. "Let us teach you war." The meaning of the message was clear, though its implications were terrifying. The Deathworlders weren't simply making a show of power. They were offering something far more sinister, a lesson in the art of warfare, a lesson that no one in the room wanted to learn. Captain Hayes spoke up, her voice sharp. "This isn't just an invasion. This is a challenge. They're trying to force us to fight on their terms." General West nodded gravely. "It's not just about conquering us. They want to prove something to themselves, to us, or maybe to the galaxy. But whatever it is, we need to be prepared. We can't just sit back and wait for them to make the next move. We have to take action." President Thompson stood silently, her eyes fixed on the message. The weight of the decision hung heavily on her shoulders. Humanity had never faced an enemy like this before. The Deathworlders weren't just another species with their own goals. They were a race born from chaos, forged in a world where survival was a brutal and unyielding struggle. And now, they were offering to teach humanity the harshest lesson of all: the price of survival. But President Thompson wasn't about to let Earth fall into chaos. She had spent her life making difficult decisions, and now she was about to make the hardest one yet. "Prepare our fleets," she ordered. "Get our best minds together. We need to understand how they think, how they fight. We won't be caught off guard again." The command was clear. The storm was no longer a distant threat. It was here, and it was time to face it head-on. The room filled with a flurry of activity as Earth's leaders mobilized. Communications were sent out to all human colonies, strategic defense systems were activated, and teams of scientists, diplomats, and military strategists were brought together to prepare for the coming conflict. But even as they worked to understand the Deathworlders, they couldn't shake the feeling that Earth was standing on the edge of an abyss. The Deathworlders were not a species to be underestimated. They had been watching humanity for far longer than anyone could comprehend. And now, it was time to see if humanity could survive the lesson they were about to receive: the heart of the conflict. As the days passed, a sense of dread settled over Earth. The once vibrant and bustling cities now felt quiet, as if the entire world was holding its breath. The calm before the storm had been shattered, and humanity had no choice but to face the approaching threat head-on. The Deathworlders, whose reputation had long been the stuff of whispers and rumors, were no longer a distant threat. They had moved into Earth's space, and their ominous message still lingered in the minds of everyone who heard it: "Let us teach you war." In the highest echelons of Earth's military command, the response to this new reality was swift and relentless. General West, Captain Hayes, and Dr. Elena Clark worked around the clock, studying every bit of information they could gather on the Deathworlders. But no matter how much they researched, the truth was clear: humanity was in uncharted waters. "We've always underestimated them," General West said grimly, staring at the tactical displays that filled the room. "Every piece of data we've collected tells us one thing: they are not like any enemy we've ever faced. This isn't just about defeating us. It's about showing us that they are the masters of war, and we are nothing more than apprentices." Captain Hayes, a brilliant strategist in her own right, leaned over a table littered with reports and communication logs. "Their tactics are unlike anything we've ever seen. They don't rely on brute force alone. They adapt, evolve, and always remain a step ahead. It's almost as if they've been studying us for decades, waiting for us to make our move." Dr. Clark, the scientist who had first deciphered the cryptic message from the Deathworlders, added, "It's not just their military tactics that make them formidable. It's their entire culture. They are a species born from a planet where survival is a daily battle. Everything about them is forged in the fires of conflict. They are not just warriors by choice. They are warriors by necessity. They don't fight to win. They fight to prove that they are the strongest. The weight of these words hung heavy in the room. Humanity had always prided itself on its ingenuity, its ability to innovate and adapt in the face of adversity. But against an enemy like the Deathworlders, that ingenuity might not be enough. "We have no choice but to fight back," President Thompson said, her voice firm but tinged with uncertainty. "We cannot allow them to dictate the terms of this conflict. If they want war, we will show them that humanity is not to be underestimated." Despite her resolve, there was a gnawing doubt in her mind. She had read the reports, seen the images of the Deathworlder fleets, and studied their technology. Everything about them was superior. They had weapons humanity couldn't even begin to comprehend. Their ships were built to withstand the harshest environments in the galaxy, and their soldiers were trained in combat from the moment they could walk. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, Earth was not without its strengths. The human race had faced countless challenges in its history and had always found a way to overcome them. This would be no different, or so they hoped. The first skirmishes between Earth's fleets and the Deathworlders' ships were brutal. The Deathworlders' ships, sleek and deadly, seemed to appear out of nowhere, striking with precision and overwhelming force. The humans were caught off guard, their fleets scattered and struggling to regroup. Despite their advanced technology, the Deathworlders' tactics were too unorthodox, too unpredictable. Earth's ships were built for defense, for diplomacy, not for the brutal efficiency of total warfare. In one particularly devastating encounter, a fleet of Earth's warships engaged a group of Deathworlder vessels in a seemingly routine battle. At first, the humans fought with everything they had, launching missiles, deploying drones, and using every weapon in their arsenal. But the Deathworlders were ready. They didn't engage in the traditional firefight. Instead, they struck from unexpected angles, using their advanced stealth technology to stay hidden in the darkness of space. Every time a human ship locked onto a target, the Deathworlders were already gone, reappearing elsewhere with devastating precision. The humans were fighting blind. And that's when the true horror of the Deathworlders' approach became clear. They weren't just fighting to destroy humanity. They were fighting to force humans to think differently about war. Every attack, every maneuver was designed to break their spirit, to teach them that war was not something that could be won by conventional means. It was a living, breathing entity, an entity that adapted to the will of its masters. Back on Earth, the government continued to scramble for solutions. Diplomacy had failed. The Deathworlders had made it clear they wanted nothing to do with talks or negotiations. The next step was to rally humanity's forces and prepare for the worst. Earth's space fleets were quickly reinforced with every available ship, every pilot, every soldier who could be spared. But it wasn't enough. The Deathworlders were everywhere, and the lessons they were teaching humanity were becoming impossible to ignore. Each loss, each failed battle only served to strengthen the resolve of the Deathworlders. They were proving their point. Humanity wasn't ready for this kind of war. But Earth wasn't giving up. Dr. Clark, General West, and Captain Hayes worked tirelessly, trying to uncover the secret to the Deathworlders' strategy. If humanity was to have any hope of survival, they needed to learn their enemy's weaknesses. And that's when they realized something that would change the course of the war. The Deathworlders weren't just strong because of their technology. They were strong because of their mindset. They approached combat not as a means to an end, but as a test of their own resilience and adaptability. In that realization, humanity found its first glimmer of hope. They had always been underestimated, always seen as fragile in the eyes of more powerful races. But now, they had something the Deathworlders didn't: a drive, an unwillingness to back down. Humanity had survived countless challenges before, and it would survive this one too. But how would they fight back? What could they possibly do against an enemy that thrived on chaos and destruction? The answer was simple, though it would take every ounce of human ingenuity and willpower to see it through. They would fight like humans. and they would never stop fighting, uniting for the unseen. The days following the first wave of attacks felt like an eternity. Earth's once unshakable confidence had been replaced by an eerie sense of vulnerability. The Deathworlders were no longer just a distant threat. They were the storm on the horizon, and humanity had no choice but to face them head-on. In the war room of Earth's command center, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The battle reports were grim, each more discouraging than the last. Earth's fleets were reeling from the sudden onslaught. The Deathworlders, with their unmatched tactics and unpredictable warfare, were proving to be nearly impossible to defeat. But amid the chaos, there was a growing realization among Earth's leaders. If they were to survive this, they could no longer afford to fight alone. President Thompson stood at the center of the room, her voice calm but resolute. "We cannot fight this war in isolation. The Deathworlders may be unstoppable on their own terms, but we are not alone in this galaxy. We have allies, even if they've been reluctant to aid us in the past. Now is the time to reach out." General West, who had witnessed countless battles in his career, nodded in agreement. "You're right. We need reinforcements, more ships, more soldiers, more intelligence, and we need them now. The longer we wait, the more ground we lose." A deep sense of urgency rippled through the room. The leaders of Earth had spent years building relationships with other species, diplomatic ties with the Galactic Council, trade agreements with neighboring star systems, and research collaborations with technological races. But now, as the Deathworlders' fleets pressed closer to Earth, those alliances would be tested. Would these other species answer humanity's call for help, or would they watch from the sidelines as the human race faced its greatest challenge? As President Thompson issued orders to initiate emergency communications with Earth's allies, General West turned to Captain Hayes, his trusted second-in-command. "We need to get into their heads. We can't just fight them with guns and ships. We need to understand them. Every bit of intel we can get on their culture, their psychology, anything that could give us an edge in this war." Captain Hayes, her mind already racing with possible strategies, acknowledged the gravity of the task ahead. "I'll assemble a team of our best minds. If we can find any kind of weakness, any gap in their mindset, we'll exploit it. It's our best shot at turning the tide." Meanwhile, on the fringes of human space, the Deathworlders continued their methodical approach. Their ships moved in flawless formation, always a step ahead of humanity's defenses. No matter how many ships Earth launched to intercept them, the Deathworlders always managed to outmaneuver them. It was as if their very essence was forged in the art of war, making them impossible to defeat by conventional means. But then something unexpected happened. In the midst of the chaos, a communication came through to Earth's command center. It was from one of the Galactic Council's lesser-known allies, a race of nomadic traders known for their vast knowledge of the stars. The message was simple, but it carried weight. "We've been watching. We'll help. But first, you must show us that humanity is worth saving." It was a curious request, but one that made sense in the context of galactic politics. For eons, the galaxy's more advanced races had viewed humanity with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. While humans had made impressive technological strides, they were still seen as unpredictable, a species that was still very much in the process of finding its place in the galaxy. To some, humanity was an ally to be nurtured. To others, it was a potential threat that had to be watched carefully. "What do they mean by that?" Dr. Clark asked, her voice tinged with confusion. "Is this some sort of test?" "Perhaps," General West replied. "We've earned the reputation of being underdogs, and maybe that's how we're seen. But this is our chance to prove we belong on the galactic stage." Earth's leaders knew that this was an opportunity they couldn't afford to waste. They needed to show their allies that they were worthy of support, not just because of their technological advancements, but because of their resolve, their ability to adapt, and their relentless spirit. They had to prove they could overcome the Deathworlders' challenge, not just by fighting but by thinking outside the box, by showing that humanity was capable of more than just survival. And so, the message went out across the galaxy, inviting Earth's allies to join the fight. But it wasn't just a plea for help. It was a call to arms, a declaration that humanity would not go down without a fight. Every species that had once doubted Earth's potential now had a chance to witness what humanity could truly achieve when backed into a corner. The response came swiftly. Ships from various alien races began arriving at the edge of human space, small at first, but growing in number as the days went by. These were not just ships of war. They were ships of knowledge, ships of strategy, and ships of hope. Humanity's allies had come to lend their strength, but they also brought with them something that Earth desperately needed: fresh perspectives, new ideas, and unique approaches to warfare. Among the first to arrive were the Enverans, a race known for their psychic abilities and their deep understanding of the psychological aspects of conflict. Their leader, a tall figure with translucent skin and an aura of calm power, spoke to Earth's leaders directly. "You are on the brink of something far greater than a mere war," the Enveran leader said, her voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. "The Deathworlders are testing you, yes, but they are also challenging your very understanding of strength. To defeat them, you must not just fight, you must evolve." Her words struck a chord with President Thompson. The Deathworlders weren't just teaching humanity war, they were pushing them to evolve, to transcend the boundaries of what they thought they knew about strength and survival. "We will evolve," Thompson replied firmly, "and we will do it together." With their allies now united, Earth's fleets began to train under the guidance of their new partners, blending their advanced technology with alien strategies and psychologies. Humanity was no longer alone. But even with all the preparation, no one could predict exactly what the Deathworlders had planned next. One thing, however, was clear: this war was far from over. The Deathworlders had thrown down the gauntlet, but humanity was ready to take it up, fueled by the strength of their unity, their ingenuity, and their unbreakable will to survive. Into the unknown. The fragile alliance between Earth and its newfound allies had barely begun to solidify when the first real test arrived. The Deathworlders, relentless and enigmatic, had been waiting for this moment, and now the scales had shifted once again. Earth had its allies, yes, but the Deathworlders were no longer simply an enemy on the horizon. They were the storm that had broken across the stars, and their next move would reveal just how far humanity had come since the first wave of attacks. Earth's combined fleet, now reinforced with ships from various races across the galaxy, was no longer just a collection of human-made vessels. It was a unified force, a testament to the resilience and adaptability of species that had once lived in isolation. The Enverans, with their mastery over psychic energy, had taught Earth's commanders how to anticipate enemy moves. The Xelari, a race known for their ingenuity in stealth technology, had shared their tactics for disappearing from the radar of even the most advanced sensors. And the Crosians, a warrior race whose physical prowess was unmatched, had taught the humans to fight with speed and precision. Still, there was a heavy weight on President Thompson's shoulders as she watched Earth's fleet prepare for what was to come. They were ready, yes, but were they ready for the Deathworlders' true power? The ships that arrived from the Deathworlders sector were unlike anything Earth had seen before, colossal, with dark, jagged exteriors that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. These ships were not just tools of war, they were a statement of their creator's dominance. "Time is running out," General West said, his voice a low growl. He stood beside President Thompson, watching as the last of Earth's reinforcements were deployed. "We know they have a fleet. We know they have warriors, but we still don't know what drives them. What's their endgame?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Earth's military might had grown exponentially since the alliance had been formed, but it still wasn't enough to guarantee victory. The Deathworlders were more than just conquerors. They were a force of nature. The war they waged was not just about territory or power. It was about something far more fundamental. To them, the very act of conflict was a ritual, an expression of their identity. And Earth, despite all its ingenuity, was still struggling to understand what that truly meant. On the bridge of the lead flagship, Captain Hayes stood at the helm, her eyes scanning the galaxy's edge. They had received reports that the Deathworlders were moving their forces into position, preparing for a confrontation that would determine the fate of humanity and its allies. There was no room for failure now. Every strategy, every maneuver had to be perfect. "General, we've received a transmission from their fleet," Captain Hayes said, her voice steady but tinged with an edge of urgency. "It's encrypted, but we're decoding it." "Do we know what it says?" General West asked, his brow furrowed. "Not yet," Hayes replied, "but we're working on it." Just as she finished speaking, the communications officer on the bridge gave a sharp intake of breath. "Captain, we've got it. The message is coming through." The message, when decoded, was simple yet chilling. "We've been waiting for this moment. You will be the lesson, humanity. This is the beginning of your end." The words felt like a slap in the face. Humanity had spent so much time preparing for the war, hoping that it would be a test of their strength. But now, they realized the truth. They weren't the ones who would determine the outcome of this battle. The Deathworlders had already decided their victory. This was not about defeating Earth. This was about teaching humanity their place in the galaxy. President Thompson, still reeling from the implications of the message, gripped the edge of her command table. The weight of her responsibility pressed down on her chest. If the Deathworlders wanted a lesson, then they would get one. But it would be on humanity's terms. "We've spent too long letting them dictate the rhythm of this war," Thompson said, her voice filled with resolve. "It's time we show them that we are more than just their students. We are humanity, and we will not be erased." General West turned to her, his eyes sharp with a renewed sense of purpose. "We've trained our forces. We've gathered every scrap of intelligence we can. Now it's time to act. We take the fight to them." Earth's fleet, now in formation with its allies, began to move. This was no longer just a defensive campaign. This was humanity's counterstrike, a declaration that Earth would not be a passive player in this war. As the ships moved toward the Deathworlder fleet, an uneasy tension settled over the bridge of each vessel. For the first time since the Deathworlders had entered Earth's space, the humans were in control of the situation. But the question remained, would their courage be enough to overcome an enemy that thrived on destruction? Back on Earth, in the heart of the command center, Dr. Clark reviewed the data that had been gathered over the last few weeks. The Deathworlders had been studying humanity just as closely as humanity had been studying them. Every move, every battle, had been calculated, dissected, and analyzed. The Deathworlders had made it clear they wanted a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But in their attempt to break humanity, they had underestimated one crucial thing: humanity's capacity for growth. "Captain," Dr. Clark said through the comms, "we found something. There's a pattern in their strategy that we haven't fully explored. It's subtle, but I think it's the key to turning this war in our favor." "Go on," Captain Hayes replied, her voice sharp. "The Deathworlders thrive on unpredictability. Their greatest strength is their ability to adapt, but their weakness is that they never fully commit to a single course of action. They move, they strike, and then they retreat. If we can bait them into overcommitting, we can strike at the heart of their fleet." The idea took root immediately. It was risky, but it was humanity's only shot. They would have to lure the Deathworlders into a false sense of victory, then strike when they least expected it. The plan was set in motion. The fate of Earth, its allies, and the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. As the fleets prepared for the final confrontation, the humans knew one thing for certain: they were fighting not just for survival, but for their place in the stars. The Deathworlders had their lesson, but humanity would write the final chapter. The final gambit. The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly before them, cold and infinite. But within that emptiness, the tension was palpable. Earth's fleet, alongside its allied forces, had gathered for what would be the decisive confrontation. They had trained, planned, and adapted for this moment. The Deathworlders had shown their strength, their relentlessness. Now, humanity was ready to prove that their ingenuity, determination, and unity could stand toe-to-toe with the most formidable force the galaxy had ever known. The plan was set in motion. The Deathworlders were accustomed to seeing the predictable patterns of human strategy. They relied on their ability to strike fast and hard, to overwhelm with precision and brute force. But humanity had learned from the best minds of the galaxy. The deception was simple. Lure the Deathworlders into an opening, make them think they had the upper hand, and then strike with everything they had when their guard was down. It was a gamble, a high-risk maneuver that would test the very limits of Earth's ability to survive. "We have one shot at this," Captain Hayes said as she stared out at the approaching Deathworlder fleet. Her voice, though steady, carried the weight of the plan's significance. "Once we begin, there's no turning back. We either succeed or we all fall." General West, standing beside her, gave a grim nod. "We've got the element of surprise on our side. But the real question is, will they bite? They've been so calculated in every move they've made. We need to make this look like a mistake, a weakness. If they don't take the bait, we're in trouble." Dr. Clark, who had been working feverishly with Earth's top strategists, spoke up from the command center. "It's the perfect trap. We've analyzed their patterns. The Deathworlders believe in dominance through force. If we give them the illusion of victory, they'll push too far. That's when we strike." President Thompson, who had been watching the preparations with a mixture of resolve and anxiety, addressed the fleet one final time. "This is our moment. Humanity has always been underestimated. Today, we prove that we are not just survivors. We are fighters, creators, and builders. We fight not just for Earth, but for the future of every species in this galaxy. Hold the line. Show them who we really are." As the fleet approached the edge of the Deathworlders' territory, the human ships fell into position, forming a seemingly disjointed formation that appeared to lack cohesion. It was exactly the kind of mistake the Deathworlders would expect. The vessels were spread out, vulnerable, with apparent gaps between them. It was a deliberate weakness, a carefully crafted illusion designed to draw the Deathworlder ships in. At the front of the formation, the flagship, the Endurance, powered up its weapon systems, though it remained eerily quiet, as if waiting for the inevitable. The Deathworlder ships loomed in the distance, their colossal forms slowly advancing, encircling the humans like a predator sizing up its prey. The Deathworlder ships were massive, their dark, jagged designs striking fear into the hearts of anyone who saw them. It seemed inevitable that they would strike, as they always had, with precision and overwhelming force. Then, as if on cue, the Deathworlder fleet moved forward. They took the bait. Every ship surged toward the apparent weak spots in humanity's formation, eager to exploit the opening. Their tactics, as expected, were flawless. But what they didn't expect was the sudden shift in the human strategy. Without warning, the human ships that had seemed so vulnerable activated cloaking systems and slipped into stealth mode, disappearing from the Deathworlder sensors. The unexpected maneuver caused confusion in the Deathworlder ranks. Their ships, now without clear targets, hesitated for a split second, just long enough for humanity's remaining vessels to close the gap. "We've got them," Captain Hayes shouted over the comms. "Now fire." The ambush was on. From the shadows, Earth's fleet emerged with a sudden, coordinated barrage of weapons, all aimed directly at the Deathworlder ships. The Deathworlders, taken completely off guard, scrambled to retaliate, but the humans were relentless. Each ship, each fighter, fired with precision, hitting the Deathworlder vessels in key areas: engines, weapons systems, and communication arrays. The Deathworlder's once imposing fleet was suddenly vulnerable, their defenses buckling under the weight of humanity's counterattack. The battle was brutal. Every ship, every fighter, was engaged in the chaos of war. Explosions lit up the void, and laser fire streaked across the dark expanse of space. The Deathworlders retaliated fiercely, their ships re-engaging with terrifying speed, but it was too late. The humans had the upper hand now, their tactics proving more than a match for the Deathworlders' calculated aggression. In the midst of the chaos, President Thompson watched from the command center, her heart pounding as Earth's fleet held its ground. She had seen war before, but never on this scale. Every decision had led them to this moment. They had proven that humanity could fight on their terms, that they were capable of far more than survival. As the battle raged on, General West monitored the Deathworlders' movements, scanning for any sign that they might attempt a counteroffensive. But the Deathworlders were not backing down. They were adapting, just as they always had. However, the humans had the initiative now, pushing forward, pressing their advantage, and exploiting the weaknesses they had carefully uncovered. "What's their status?" Captain Hayes asked, her voice tense as she watched the tactical screens flash with new data. "They're regrouping," General West replied. "But we've caused significant damage. Their formation is breaking apart. They're not used to being on the defensive." Dr. Clark's voice crackled over the comms. "The Deathworlders are pushing their limits, but we need to end this quickly. If we don't, they'll adapt once again, and we could lose the advantage." The human forces, emboldened by their newfound momentum, pressed forward with renewed vigor. The final gambit had worked. The Deathworlders had been drawn in. And now humanity was showing them what it meant to be underestimated. The tide of battle shifted. The Deathworlders, though relentless and fierce, could no longer maintain their initial overwhelming presence. The humans had struck at the heart of their fleet, exploiting their weaknesses and forcing them into a retreat. The storm had finally broken, and for the first time, humanity was in control. But even as victory seemed within reach, President Thompson knew this was only the beginning. The Deathworlders were not a force that could be easily vanquished. Their resilience, their adaptability, and their thirst for war would remain a constant challenge. But humanity had proven something vital that day. They were not simply participants in this war. They were players, and they would shape the future of the galaxy on their own terms.